order and take a roll
Call to
call.
order and say what meeting it is, and then do the roll call, and then say item number 2, and you'll just ask for a motion, Leslie?
Yep. Okay, am I coming on in 38?
Yes. You know, go for it.
Yeah.
When it gets to 3, you can say, okay, I'm going to turn this over to our design team,
Okay.
when the screen comes on, that's when you can start talking, because
Well, last time we were caught by the train. Now what's our excuse?
I would like to call to order this meeting for the Norman Forward Senior Center Ad Hoc Advisory Group. And I'd like to thank all the members of the public for being here this evening. We appreciate your attendance. I would like to do a roll call for the members of the meeting. I'm Richard Bailey. I'm here presiding this evening. Mary Bonner, absent. Gail Hobson, absent. Nadine Jewell,
Here.
Julie Knutson,
Here.
Bill Terry,
Here?
Tammy Vaughn, I'm sorry,
Here.
and Christy Wright, and Tom Sherman, both absent. Item number 2 on our agenda this evening is a review of the minutes from September 18th, 2019, and October 9th, 2019. I believe all the members have copies of the minutes. May I have a motion to approve both?
So moved.
Motion that we approve both. I'll second.
Okay, the motion is made and seconded to approve both minutes from both meetings. Signify your acceptance by raising your hand. The vote is unanimous. At this point, I would like to turn the meeting over to FSB, who's going to make a series of presentation about the survey results and the floor plan options for the senior center. Gentlemen?
Come down here so you can. So thank you all for coming out tonight, and hopefully a few people logged in online. My name is John Sempner. I'm a principal at FSB. With us we have our consultants, our senior center consultants, Bill Clifford and Craig with Barker Rinker CCAT out of Denver. With me from FSB, we have Jerry in the back handing out some cards, and Fred Schmidt, one of our principals. The cards that Jerry are handing out, there's 3 of them. Each person should get 3. They're labeled 1, 2, and 3. The first says site on it, the second says plan, and the third says the look. So kind of our goal today is to walk through the site, the plan for what's going inside the building, and then some rough concepts for what the building could look like on the outside. So through that, we're going to talk about the survey results that we got, and we'd love for you to just write down whatever impressions you have as it relates to those 3 topics on each of the cards. And at the end, we'd like to gather those together such that we can go through them and analyze them to make sure that we understand which direction we're going to go. A lot of the plans and options we're going to show you have alternates, or it can go this way and that way. So we want to hear from you and get that feedback. So we'll kind of walk through this a little bit in presentation style, and then at the end, if there's some questions, we'll grab them then. Talk about schedule. So today, you can see we're here at the second public meeting. The survey just closed last week, and we've been madly entering all the hand surveys that we received right at the end of the survey. So this one is really to try to bring together some of the exercises we did in the last few meetings and bring them together into kind of a rough concept and then bring that to a final plan. At the end of this, we'll take that to the Parks Commission and then to City Council for approval. And then we'll start our construction document process. We'll create the construction documents, we'll bid the construction documents, then we'll start building the building. So there still is a long road on the back end of this, but this is kind of the schedule as it relates. Here it is in list form if you prefer that way. Budget, just to repeat, previously, we're looking on bid day, $6 million to bid the building. There are design fees on top of that. There are testing fees. There's furniture to buy. And then the city does have a contingency fund in there as well for unseen issues. So we're going to start off today with the site. Option one. If anybody needs a pen, Jerry has them in the back. Just raise your hand. He'll grab you. If anybody didn't get a card, let us know. So the site we're talking about is right on the southwest corner of Reeves Park. The city master planned this area, and the senior center was chosen to be at that southwest corner. So when you kind of zoom in, really the opportunity there to the north is that great lawn. And how do you incorporate that? There's also an opportunity in the future. OU is looking to realign Constitution Avenue. So there might be some future land. So we'll show you two different options there on the site. This is the first option. It really brings kind of an east-west aligned building centered right there on the south side of that great lawn. It gives you the most prominence to the lawn, and it allows parking to sweep around the entire building. It provides people a close proximity for parking, but it pushes the building a little bit away from Constitution. So as that moves farther south, it potentially doesn't take advantage of that future land that could be available. An option could be to take that building and shift it down farther. And really we could set it so the corner of the building would land right on the edge of the existing roadway, such that when the road does curve down, it really allows us to use that site. And whether that site's for site amenities or for additional building is something that's really up in the air. They're both very diagrammatic. They both have an entry kind of on the south. The second one, the entry point is more to the southeast along the this looped drive. Parking here would need to wrap, and likely you'd lose some parking, especially early on that west edge. So when you're doing that, you would probably push parking pretty far to the north, almost along the Great Lawn, or it could even cross the street over. That poses some challenge from both accessibility, distance to your parking. So that's probably, as we've talked about trying to align the building with a better use of the long-term, gaining space, but maybe not doing that in the same time frame as the realignment. So if the realignment had happened, we could take advantage of that land. But if it hasn't happened, then we're gonna have to clear a lot of that parking away from that area of the building and put it somewhere. And it's maybe not in the best place initially. So as you look at those sites, I'd love for you to just write down comments. What are your opinions? What are your preferences? You know, which way are lean? So once again, option 1, kind of an east-west. You have parking really wrapping the entire building on the south, leaving a great view to the north. Option 2, trying to take advantage of that future expansion and really gonna push some parking here a little bit farther to the north and to the east. With that, we're gonna talk a little bit about the plan. I'll hand it over to Bill.
Hello, everybody. My name is Bill Clifford. I'm with BRS Architecture. Want to recap some of our public outreach results. And I want to, before I start, I want to commend all of you and the rest of the senior community. We had terrific response to the survey that was put out, so you'll see that coming up here. But we have a number of different kind of data sets that we have collected, and I'll go through each one of those. So the first one, at our meeting with the ad hoc committee, we looked at what we called the card game, and that was kind of prioritizing the spaces that were available and trying to determine what could fit in a $6 million building budget. So we had one group that made some prioritization of spaces. The red cards you see there are kind of the required administrative spaces. There's a community room, catering kitchen, crafts rooms. I'm trying to read these on the small screen here. 50-person classroom and senior adult lounge, and then a larger elementary school sized gymnasium that is big enough for a small basketball court and 2 pickleball courts. And then phase 2 is all the other possible spaces. You see the blue cards there. Those are the wellness pool and the aquatic support space. So our next group was more interested in aquatics. So you can see that they have all the admin spaces in the red there. They also, their next priority was the aquatic spaces. They had senior adult lounge, sorry, I'm trying to read these. I can't see them there either. I hope you can see them better than I can. The community events room, building, the crafts room, and the fitness center. So as you can see in that one, a little bit different focus. And you will want to remember these, as these are the basis for some of the plans that were developed that we're going to be looking at later. So that's one input source. We also, at the first public meeting we had, we handed out comment cards. You can see a picture of that on the left. So the results of that, the priorities there, were social gathering, which relates to the senior lounge, group exercise, that's the aerobics room, warm water aquatics, again the wellness therapy pool, card and board games, and large gathering receptions, educational classes. And then you can see how the rest of the spaces came in as far as priorities of that comment card survey. And that was done at the public meeting. We also had some outdoor spaces we asked you about, and the highest vote getter there was an outdoor walking opportunity on site outdoors. So we had a third source of polling was our dotocracy game, where we handed out dots to everyone, and we showed spaces. These boards were up in the back of the room, back here, back where Jerry's sitting now, and asked everyone to prioritize, put dots on the spaces that they were most interested in a new senior center. So in this survey, you can see the wellness therapy pool, 37 votes, the adult lounge, 27, community events hall had 25, group fitness room 20, and so on. So you start to get a feel for what the priority spaces are. Here's the bottom half of the dotocracy results. So the impressive part is really the online survey and handwritten surveys that were sent out through the community. So close to 1,500 responses, which is really very impressive. And we'll show you a little bit about what we learned from that survey. So the majority of respondents, this is an age ranking, but 55 to 75, so right in the majority of respondents are kind of what you would think of as the traditional senior age group. How long have you lived in Norman? So you can see more than half of the respondents have lived in Norman more than 25 years. So some long-term residents that are part of our survey here and part of the senior group. The next slide, have you ever visited the Norman Senior Center? So the majority of folks that responded had not visited the current senior center. And then, would you visit a new wellness center? So looks like there's a lot of good anticipation of a facility that, if we provide the right amenities, people are interested in coming out and using that center. So what are the preferences of that group? So the number one responding result is indoor walking, then group exercise, educational classes, social gathering, fitness, and aquatics therapy pool are kind of the top group of spaces that were voted on by the public. On the outdoor side, outdoor walking again is the most popular space. We do have the capability to look at each space and rank it per age group. So just to see if there's anything interesting that comes out of that. There's actually a pretty good even spread of amongst the age groups and spaces. We look for the areas that have a larger group than the rest. So in this case, we see that the older seniors over 75 have a stronger interest in prepared meals on site. We also see that the younger group, less than 50 years old, have more interest in the gymnasium type activities. And also more interest, we had a question about music practice rooms. But for the most part, there's a pretty even distribution as far as preference of ages for different types of space. On the outdoor side, again, that stands true. We see the younger group have a little stronger interest in the gardening than other spaces, but again, a pretty even distribution of spaces. So I want you to as we go further into the program tonight, I want you to try and remember all those priorities that were identified from those different data sources. And as we look at the plans, we want to try and remember or help those data input sources help us make decisions on what is included in the first phase of the senior center building, or the wellness center, I'm sorry. But before we do that, we want to give you a little bit of feedback. If you remember, we also had asked you to tell us about Norman, and we had 5 questions that we asked, and we got some great responses there, and I'm going to have Craig come up and go through some of that and tell you how we use that information.
All right. My name's Craig Bauk. I'm with Barker Rinker CCAT as well. And we thought, this exercise that we just went through is so data-driven, and it's great, and it's going to help us. But there's a subjective side of this whole process too. And if you recall, we asked you those 5 questions. Those 5 questions resulted in some pretty interesting and pretty consistent, actually, results. Let's go through them. The first question we asked was this one. So how would you describe where you live when you're away from Norman, when you're away from home? And that cloud of words, that you might be familiar with that, it's called a wordle. And the way that works is it takes all of the responses, which we put into the computer, and anytime a word is repeated, it makes it a little bit bigger. So the biggest words in that diagram are the ones that were repeated the most. And so we can infer from that there is some commonality of belief in those certain types of words. So let's take a look at some of these and see what we see. We see in this one, when you talk about being away from Norman, what words come to mind? Well, we see town, right? Not city, town. Community, some association with the college. Friendly. Norman, just the word Norman, and the identity of, must be some history with that. OU, we see that in there. And we see a connection with people. So, I mean, when we look at that, we think, oh, that's really interesting. Now, it's also interesting what I don't see there, right? When I go away, what do I not see there? And I'm not necessarily seeing anything that's a particular piece of architecture or a particular place, maybe, other than OU. It's more of an idea, right? It's a town, it's a community. Let's move on. So the next one is, when you're here, what kinds of experiences and events must visitors experience? Or what, if they're going to have an amazing opportunity to leave with a good impression of what Norman is truly like, what might they do? So what are the things that come up? OU. I noticed even in the council chambers here tonight, there's a flag for OU. It's obviously a very important piece of being here and the experience of it. And maybe not necessarily just the campus, but the idea and the activities and all the things surrounding the university. But arts come up a lot. Museum, the art walks, the campus itself, some of the specific museums and their names, music festivals. Okay. Why do you live in Norman? Biggest word on here is community. There's some connection here to the first question about how do you describe the place that you live. So community, town, the university, family, good. Been here for many years. Why do you live here? How do you want to be perceived? So you may already be this way, but it's also a goal of how can this project potentially further the perception of, how you want to be seen as a community. The words that came up here, inclusive. Now you might see, why is inclusive here twice? Well, one has a capital letter and one doesn't, but if you combine those, it overwhelms this diagram. So inclusive is the dominant theme for how you want to be perceived. Friendly, welcoming, safe, diverse. How do you not want to be perceived? What things would you want to change or definitely not go down that path? And what's interesting here is the word town came up here. And I'm curious about that because we saw that as something we see as something we want to be. So these don't always give us black and white answers. But what I also see on here is I don't want to be seen as closed-minded, rigid, closed, don't want to be just seen as a college town. And then there's a whole bunch of other sort of equally weighted ideas in here. But the dominant one in here is we need to get down to this idea of like, what is it? Closed-minded, rigid, closed, I don't want to be seen in those ways. And so we have all these words, we have all these ideas. So our job is to take these and just sort of put them into some themes. And so we've taken a first stab at that. It's very rough, but it's a first stab. The first we call them defining guidelines, by the way. The first two that come to mind are these ideas. And with these, we sort of put them together with a word and then a couple of images just to get us started. We're going to take this to the next level, but we wanted to see if we're beginning to get close. So the first word is overlap. And the reason we came up with overlap was because we got a pretty distinct feeling that this idea of inclusiveness was really important. And so we interpreted that with this word of overlap because when you have overlap, people can still be distinct, and yet it's when they overlap, when they interact, when they come together, when they have an opportunity at a place like this senior center, wellness center might give us, it gives us the opportunity to sort of mix a little bit. And it's the bringing together of two distinct people or groups or ideas. When they overlap, that's sort of the magic. That's sort of the opportunity to grow and have a different kind of experience. And so many of the things that, and the activities that we're talking about doing in this facility give us that opportunity to create that overlap. So that's one idea. The other idea is this idea of radiant. The reason we picked that was this dominance of OU, quite frankly. And it's the idea that there's an energy there. There's something going on the university that permeates life here in Norman. It's the activities, it's the identity associated with it. It's just quite frankly, it's the students potentially. It's the influence of art, music, all those things that come and radiate not only in the campus, but radiate out into the community. So there's something about that, something about the influence of that strong university. A couple of other ideas. We came up with the word experiential. And what we mean by that is it seemed in many of the words that we like to have curated experiences while we're here. And remember that question about what people should do when they come? What events and things must we do? Well, we saw a lot of things, a lot of museums, art festivals, music festivals, those sorts of things. And we think of those as being experiential. What we didn't see as much of is, hey, you have to go to this particular park, or you have to stand on this particular mountain, or something like that. It was less about a specific place, and it was more about come and experience something with us. And those were more event-oriented, so we came up with the word experiential. And then the last one is this idea called energy within. And we came up with this one because when we asked about the special things in Norman, everything was, for the most part, inward looking. And what I mean by that is words like community and years and being here. I didn't see a lot of, oh, we need to go to Oklahoma City, or we need to go out and do this. We need to go out here. You know, if you bring people here, there's plenty to do here that you want people to experience. And so all of the things that people seem to identify with really were here, and they weren't necessarily out of boundaries. They weren't necessarily away. And so this idea, and even on the campus itself, that's why we put this picture here, a lot of the events all have to do with coming together and experiencing things together within the community. So how these things begin to influence us is we're going to show you some diagrams about how plans come together. And then eventually we're going to show you how the building is going to look. And we're going to have to make choices about materials and organizations and whether it's transparent or opaque and all these sorts of things. And the idea with this is potentially these could influence the way we do that in a way that sort of speaks to some of these things that you value. Does that make sense? It might not make sense until we show you them. And I agree that it's a little bit vague at the moment, but we want to find a way with which we can take your words and the things that you think are important and then have them translate back into the way we organize ourselves, organize the building, and maybe most importantly, how we experience the building once it's built. And so it's going to be up to us to sort of relate that back to you as we go through the next steps. But we wanted to share with you that process we use to sort of get subjective information in addition to all the data, Because if this was purely just a math problem, right, it wouldn't be as interesting a project. It wouldn't be as meaningful as a building that's going to be very specific to Norman. Okay, and so with that, we're going to go back to the practical side. Bill's going to come up here and show you some plan options.
All right. So if you remember, we had. Oh, okay, yes. Very good. So now we are talking about the subject matter for card number 2. And if you remember, we had, going back to the card game, our initial program input source, we had 2 different groups of cards. And so we developed plan diagrams based on those preferences in the card game. We'll go through those. And what that really starts to talk about is what can we afford, or what spaces can we include in the budget that we have. And those are, some tough choices that we'd love to have all the spaces, but we have a budget that we have to work within. So this is the first plan option. And really the big difference between these 2 plans is whether in this one you can see there's a large gymnasium. That gym affords the opportunity for 2 pickleball courts and a small basketball court. You probably could play volleyball in there as well. So there's a lot of room for bigger type physical activities in this one. It also includes senior lounge as you come in the building, entering from the south here. A crafts room, dry and wet crafts are both represented in this plan. We have a larger space for events for 120 people. And then off the end, a catering kitchen and a larger classroom that could also likely be divided into 2 smaller rooms. So between all of these, the event space and the class space, you could have 4 separate spaces for different types of classes. Of course, we'd have some lockers, mechanical and storage, and admin space. So that is our option 1 in the base plan. This next version, if we could get everything, or what are the future phases that we might add to this option? Well, you can see the wellness pool over here. We add some additional space on the gym, fitness weights, and aerobics room, and then we're showing a track around that, a walking track around that area. On this other end, we're adding game room, senior wellness, and a demonstration or the healthy cooking kitchen are all part of that second phase. One thing you'll notice with this plan is it's kind of based around a corridor running east-west, so it's more of a linear scheme. The second option, and this one is the group that selected a wellness pool. You can see that as, again, entry coming off the south, admin right here, senior lounge off to one side. Opposite that is our 120-person event space.
Because they can't see your cursor.
Oh, okay, you can.
Yeah, if you go to that one guy.
Oh, okay. This one?
That's good. That's it.
That guy. Oh, okay. Can you see that one? Oh, okay. Good. Okay, so here's our 120-person event space. The wet arts crafts, and that is the pottery program, which we've seen is very active in Norman. A fitness and cardio area, lockers, and then the support spaces off here. So a little different grouping. This one a little more centralized as far as the organization. Not have to, once you walk in, you can see almost all the spaces right from the main lobby. When we go to phase 2 on this program, you can see this group added a smaller gym that's big enough for 1 pickleball court and an aerobics room, a jog track in that area. And then on the other end, we add game room, classroom, and a partner wellness is a potential space there. And I think that's pretty much it. I think we'd love to get your input on priorities there, and I think, once again, weighing those options versus all the input, considering what we saw for the online survey, can help us decide which plan or combination of plans is the best way to go for your wellness center. And now, Fred is going to talk about some of the exterior possibilities.
Thank you, Bill. Fred Schmidt with FSB Architects. So I'm going to walk you through some of the ideas of what the exterior could be. And this is another opportunity for you all to weigh in with some thoughts with card number 3 and give some feedback on what you see here, what you like, maybe what you'd like to see differently. So going to go to this first slide here. And I'm going back to this option that Bill showed you of the gymnasium as being the primary. And so we just picked one of these to provide you with some ideas of how this optional plan could be sort of extruded into an exterior statement of the building, just to give you an idea. We're going to show you a couple different palettes of materials, how those can be sort of combined, and the kind of architectural statement that those can make. So the first one that I'm going to show you is what we would call a more contemporary stylized plan. So this is a very streamlined looking building. It's a much cleaner looking building. This building is somewhat in the family of some of the newer civic buildings that you see around Norman, like the new libraries, the main library, the East Library, those type of structures. So it has a very nice sense to it. Those are very handsome buildings. We think this would also be a nice, handsome building as well. What you see primarily is in the whiteness there. So actually, I wanted to take you back to the floor plan and share with you a couple thoughts here that I missed. When you look at this large space of the gymnasium and whatnot, this is a very high volume, a very large volume space. The other spaces don't have as high as ceilings, but they're going to be generous. But these kind of spaces help inform and drive what the exterior massing of the building actually looks like. So that's why you begin to see in these elevations, you see a large massing area here. That's because that's the gymnasium multi-sport type facility. It requires a much taller space, a much bigger space. And you see the other spaces of the classrooms and meeting rooms are a little bit lower profile. So this is a lower view, kind of more of an eye view that you're standing there looking at the entrance with the gymnasium to the left and the other buildings and the covered entry coming in. We have another view here that is kind of looking, you'll see that there are some covered patios, porches that occur on either side of the building, north and south, that are in conjunction with the craft spaces so they can spill outdoors. But on the other side, the meeting rooms, because they could spill outdoors as well. But it's also just a nice gathering space outside when the weather is cooperating in Oklahoma. It's not cooperating this week very well, though, I must say. Here's another view looking at kind of that covered area. But you'll see that these are very clean materials, very streamlined materials. It kind of gives you that sort of a modern look. We do have incorporated some brick. So we are bringing in some brick just to kind of tie it into some of the buildings in the surrounding area, primarily university buildings and whatnot that are in that area. So that is the classic University of Oklahoma red brick blend that you'll see there and you see around town. So this is study 1. So this is what that option 1 could look like when we bring it into a 3-dimensional aspect and some of the materials that we could apply to it to have it be a more contemporary, clean looking type of facility. So the second one, this is study 2. And study 2 is what we call a little bit more traditional. So for this project, this study of materials, we're really borrowing from a sort of a different group of buildings around town. We're looking at the Jimmy Austin golf course, okay, the building that's there. It's got pre-engineered metal buildings. Some of the more historic buildings on the OU campus have these sloped roofs going with them. And we're bringing in a lot warmer materials, so this is a warmer looking building. We get down kind of a little bit more at street level, you'll see that it does have the brick that's coming in that is borrowing from the OU campus and Jimmy Austin and some of those type of facilities. Even some of this does occur down in the research park area as well. Above that, we actually have these lighter panels here, which is kind of it's a wood grain sort of a metal panel that gives a very nice look up there. We do have some of these metal panels in the larger volume, but you'll see that we have these pitched roofs that kind of bring that building down a little bit in scale and not have it be quite so contemporary looking. As we move towards the ground level, you'll see that the covered patios and whatnot have what is a sort of a wood sort of a structure, once again a little bit warmer balance of materials. It also has this extended covered walkway coming in, which is also in the other solution as well. Within the large volume, what you'll see, and I'm going to go back just a section here, these areas here are what we call translucent panels. These allow natural light to come in, but it also keeps you from having direct sun and glare in those sports areas because you really don't want to have any glare. Whereas in the other areas, we have the windows that you can see in and out of much more readily. So I think you can kind of get a sense and a feel of the difference of these two contemporary versus somewhat traditional in these solutions. And so these are just some preliminary thoughts. The plan itself is preliminary. It's an option. We took that and we showed you what you could do out of that in terms of some exterior elevations and how those could be played both contemporary and traditional in that sense. So, time to hand it off. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. All right. So tonight, hopefully we've explained to you some options on the site, some options on the plan, and some options on the look. We've also tried to give you the data that we collected as we went through this process to kind of justify that. And we'd love your opinions on that. So, first off, I hope everybody will fill this out and hand these to us. But we would like to open it up to hear some opinions on it, to see what we're doing right and what we're not.
If there's any cursing, I will take this away. Might be fun.
As a past engineer, building engineer, flat roofs, higher maintenance. I like these elevated roofs that they had on that one plan. The extension of the walkway out the front, that's something I want to talk to you about later.
Okay.
Maybe extending it and show you a little different thing about maybe the buses can pull up an easier way.
Okay.
That's about all I got right there. I just want everybody to know that a flat roof is going to really cost you a lot more maintenance,
We appreciate that.
and we don't need that. That's all. Thank you.
Sure.
Dave Beck, University of Oklahoma. One of the issues is
Yep.
this?
That's,
Is it working? You're showing long walkways, that especially that second, the more traditional look. We need covered walkways and covered parking. And I know I'm not sure which scheme that you had, but you were showing parking way off from the entrance. And one of the whole points of this is we've got to have parking and a covered drop-off for buses up front. You've actually recessed that entry back so far that you're creating a long walkway. And, we have very physically fit seniors, and we have those that are having a hard time walking, so we need to accommodate those that they can park close by.
thank you, Dave. We have a couple up here in the front.
Hi, my name is Jan, and I'm just cannot
Will
stand
will
the
you,
name
will you,
Wellness Center.
will you hold the mic?
I cannot stand the name Wellness Center. It sounds like a healthcare facility.
Okay.
It sounds like I need to go line up for a flu shot instead of an enjoyable experience. So I don't see anything wrong with Norman Senior Center. Name it after someone, but wellness it just sticks in my craw, you know?
Okay.
Other than that, I think it's a great work and job you're doing, and I think you're getting it together really well. Just please change the name.
Thank you.
One thing I'm not
Will you,
seeing,
will you state your name? Sorry.
Patricia Billingsley,
Thank you.
one thing I'm not seeing in your plan at all, though it may be there, is what about tornadoes? Do you have they're putting in tornado shelters in a lot of the schools. It's, one of the rooms is picked and it's just extra reinforced. Are you going to be doing that? Because, this year we've had a record number. It happens.
Currently, we're not showing any in the budget, but that can be done. But it is a line item in the budget, so.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's always expensive.
Yeah.
And second, I really liked the plan that was more compact. And for many of, the second one. And the reason is what some of the other people have been saying. These long corridors are really hard on people's knees when they get to be 80, whatever. So that needs to be taken into consideration.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there any kind of option to have a coffee bar or something as part of the gathering room?
I think the coffee bar would be in the senior lounge area.
Yeah.
So
So
there
that's
is-
a component of that space.
Okay, you didn't mention it. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
We always put the cart before the horse. We sure would like to have some more money so that we could put some more things in. I'm thinking if we don't have enough spaces to bring 200 or 300 people into that building every day or every week, we are not going to have enough money to pay the utilities and to pay the people to work in it and do all that. I thought we were going to have a city council meeting and try to find out if we could have more money before we had this group. But since we didn't, has there been any idea where we could get some more money so that we can have enough things going on so more people will be sure they sign up and we don't have just a building sitting out here that nobody's going to come to? Because right now I think they pay $30 a year at the senior citizens building, and I do not think that's enough money to pay the water bill or whatever. And the other thing, are you going to be using any solar or geotherm in the building?
When we played the card game, one of the card options was environmental efficiencies, and that and solar and those types of things would have gone in there. I didn't see that rate highly in that card game, so I'm not sure we ask a survey question on that though. So I wouldn't, so we will have a highly efficient building, but I don't see any energy generation like solar as part of this project, unless I'm wrong. So we don't have it planned today. Yep. So on November 12th, council will have a study session on, and I believe they'll bring up the topic of the budget for this.
You showed us phase 2 for either plan option.
Mm-hmm.
Now the plans 1 and 2, I assume, are within the budget that you proposed. The question in my mind is, and along with Nadine's question, is what's the possible budget for the phase 2 of each one of those?
So what those futures were, if you went back to the original card game, we had the primary components, and then we had some future components, and so we just programmed out the entire future components of that card game.
My name is Robert Husky. The question is the possible cost for those, because that's really the budget we're shooting for.
Did you price them in that?
Oh, I can look that up and let you know.
Okay.
We might want to note that the images that we showed of the buildings are the entire build-out
Correct.
of phase 1 and 2.
Yeah. We'll have to add them up and look at that. We can get you that, though.
I just wondered whether it was in the ballpark of twice the amount.
I believe it would be less than that. Other questions?
Montgomery Johnston. In addition to knowing what the potential costs of the expansion of the two options are, when you, and if we can't come up with the money or whatever, hopefully we can, in your planning for the first part, is that going to be directly in thinking about that option 2, so that you've got your utilities all set up and I'm not sure, you've got extra space in your electrical closet, things like that, but I'm not sure how your bathroom count's going to work, if you can double up or you're going to do anything extra to accommodate that second phase.
That's why we do this initially, is to make sure that when we are designing a building, especially one that we think may grow, we want to make sure that corridors, bathrooms, administration spaces, storage spaces, all those core functions are sized appropriately, such that if you do add a large future piece, and one of the options of an aquatics piece was a future piece, sizing everything such that you can add that is important, and so, but there's some dollar figures associated with that, and so that's going to be that would be our goal, but it's going to be up to the budget and the ad hoc committee to make choices along the way of where do we build in that infrastructure piece today versus where do we push that off to a future edition.
Bill Terry, just to reemphasize what Mr. Beck brought up a few minutes ago, having been with this group 5 or 6, 7 years, whatever, parking and covered parking, it was a killer item during the early stages. Just had to be parking close to the entrance, had to have covered parking for meeting those needs of those people that needed it. So, you really need to address that. I think that's been an issue since almost day one.
One of the questions I would have for you is, give me a sense of how much covered parking you're looking for.
Well, I don't think we ever quite got into that, but certainly there's a large contingency that felt that covered parking to take care of people in wheelchairs, difficulty walking and knees and that type of thing, as I mentioned, moving around the building, certainly be a concern. Now, it's kind of like handicap accessible parking around stores. How many of those do you put in? But I would say that probably in the neighborhood of 25 to 30 areas that would be relatively close and reserved for people needing that additional assistance would certainly be a plus in what you're working on right now.
Would that be, if we assigned all of the handicap spots to be covered parking, would that be sufficient?
Probably so. I just know that, that when we first had this discussion and we looked at the old library and looked at another organization, covered parking was certainly a disability, accessibility was certainly a big issue. And I would say that probably in the neighborhood of 25 to 30 spaces, and that would probably be more than sufficient. And then with the cart access and then hopefully with city bus access, possibly get into that area, that would be, make sure we allow for that as well. So that's a couple of the issues that in your entrance area that I think, according to, following what he suggested a while ago, would certainly be important.
All right, thank you. What other comments? Beck?
This is Richard Bailey, and Bill's comments about 25 spaces may be appropriate now, but in the original, very preliminary work that was done for the other location, the architect that was doing that work had 11 spaces
Sure.
covered.
Thank you.
We talked about the covered parking. It's because we have people like Betty, who's just now leaving, that has a cart in the back of her car. And in the wintertime and in the rain and everything, she has to open the back of her car and take that out, let it down, get on it, pass it, fix her car up. And we have also joined with our group the disabled community. So a lot of them have wheelchairs and stuff, and they sure don't want to get out and take their wheelchair out and get rained on all of the time and then sit on it all day long. So that's why we need covered parking.
Thank you. Sure.
Kamala Jolly Stewart is my name. I was wondering about between the two plans, if looking at the initial build, operations, and maintenance, are they fairly similar, or how much difference is there between the two, 1 and 2?
Holistically, from a maintenance and operations, as I look at these two plans, if you look at the base case, there's one that has a pool in it, which is one of the more expensive operational pieces, and there is one that doesn't. And that's a fundamental choice between those in the base. When we look at expansions, I believe both of them have a pool.
Yes.
Because the one that doesn't has one in that expansion package. At that point, I'm not sure there would be much operational difference in the two but we would be looking for our operational partners to come in and give us their opinions on these as well. The city has an RFP out right now for solicitations from operators to come in and operate this facility. So we're excited about getting their feedback once they have been selected.
And did you look at like how many seniors it would take to keep a senior center operational when you were looking at these, or is that something that's factored in, like what the expected use or number of people are? It's kind of related. But.
Not at this time. That's something we would want to talk to the operators about.
Montgomery Johnston. Since you had developed your site plan options, the two of them, had you reconciled the $800,000, which seemed a little excessive for site work for a project this size?
No, we really haven't touched the budget for the site or the building again.
Hi, my name is Veronica Devine, and I just had a question. In the survey, it asked what we were willing to pay per month per household. Is that factored into, what is that money factored into? The building, the development, the continuation running it? And what was the results? You didn't put that up on the cards. I didn't see that.
Do you have the online version? I can rattle off the. No, that really wasn't factored into our results of the daily operation. You know, both of the programs mostly came out of the card game we had in the previous ad hoc committee meeting, and that really drove to those. In those, we have operational kind of meters for each space of this is an expensive space versus this is an inexpensive space.
And while he's setting that up, I agree that we have to have covered parking for the individuals who have handicaps, but also we need to have a covered awning where people can drive up and drop off. Not just buses, just vehicles in general. You know, the buildings are beautiful, they've got that long walkway, but like everybody was saying, people who are elderly, people who have disabilities, the walking in the rain, in the snow, is going to be a hazard. So it really needs to have a covered awning where you can pull into.
Yeah, and he'll look it up. I know what it is for the hard numbers, but I haven't seen it for the online.
And then where are we getting the money from for the future expansion? Is that coming out, is there going to be like a penny tax? Is there going to be?
So that is the, on. So on November 14th, I believe there's a discussion with City Council on that issue. So, sorry, November 12th, sorry.
I don't need a microphone. Could you go back to Plan 1 and show it on the screen, please?
Sure. When you say Plan 1, the program?
Yes.
That one?
The 120-person event room, how large is that approximately, square feet?
We. Do you have any idea? Do what? So 7 times 120. So that's just under. No, it's bigger than that. 1,500 square feet. Oh, 15 per person. Yeah, 2,500 square feet roughly.
Roughly 2,500 square foot room. Is that going to be divided so that it can be used for 2 different events? And also, is there any place in any of these drawings for stage, for speakers, musical events, something of that nature? I don't see this. I know it's not detailed here, but where's the storage? For example, if you set up bridge tables in that room, where are you going to store them afterwards?
So these are very diagrammatic, so what they're not showing is the storage associated with the rooms, and once we get into more detail about how you want to use those spaces, then that helps us determine how much storage we need to provide. So if we have table and chair storage in the event room, we know how much space that takes up. If that space also doubles as a crafts room, we may need some additional storage. To address your comment about the stage, so we will often say this classroom, we might have that be up a little higher so that we could have a operable partition that opens up, and that classroom could function as the stage for the event space. So it's a way to not have dedicated stage that never gets used for anything else. We can get multiple function out of that space by having it be a classroom most of the time, and occasionally it can be used as a stage. So if that's a priority, then there's a way to do that and not have to dedicate additional square footage just to a stage. So we do that fairly commonly. So.
How do you get up to that raised room?
So steps or a ramp.
Has to be a ramp, too many wheelchair use.
Yeah, well, you would have both probably is the answer. That's pretty typical. We always have both steps and ramp to get up to that space. Someone had asked about the cost of phase 2, and it's just in big round numbers, it's probably a little less than double if we were to do all of phase 2. But it's, we're really too early to say exactly what that cost would be, but just to give you a very rough order of magnitude, that's about where it would be.
Looks like that option, because it doesn't have the big thing sticking out front, might let buses closer. Am I seeing that correct?
So when Fred talked about the large mass of the gym, when we look at a wellness pool, we're likely also going to have a large roof, large room there. So it likely also has that large mass. It's a little more open, just in the floor plan, and so it probably would be a closer approach. But when you look at the site, and I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning. So when you kind of look at the site options, you can see here that some of this is, how close you can park to that central point. And so when you use an exterior curve like this, where it's convex, you're pushing that away. If we can align them to be concave, we can align them a little better. And that's why this one kind of compacts it up and really brings you up to the building a little bit better.
Jerry, use that mic.
And if we're not using that mic, people online can't hear us, so we need to be using it.
So that to answer the question about the preferred dues for the facility, so 30% of the respondents said $10 per month. 20% were $5 per month. 14% said no fee, and 13% said $15 per month. And 16% said $20 per month. And then the higher monthly rates had quite significantly less, like 2 and 3%. So if that helps anybody. The largest vote getter was $10 per month.
Any other questions? So we really do appreciate anything you want to put down on these. What is, if you like option 2, why? So the more information you can give us, the better. And with that, thank you all.
The last item on the agenda is adjournment from members of the ad hoc committee. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn.
Second. We have a motion to adjourn seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
This meeting's adjourned.